So this is joint work with Arturo, Valdo, and Victor from Chile, my student Gibo Park, and Meng Sun, who's in Taiwan. So I'll just go over the title. So the title is Finding Diverse Triangulations and Geometric Knapsacks. For now, you can ignore the geometric knapsack part of this, and hopefully finding diverse triangulations kind of gives you an idea of what the talk is about. But let's proceed. This thing stop working again. Okay. All right. So the problem belongs to a new class of optimization problem, which we call diverse optimization. So in classical optimization, you have some problem P, and it has some solution space X. And you want to just output the best solution from this space of possible solutions. In this diverse version, what you want to output is many different looking solutions to the same optimization problem. So the setting is the following. So X is your solution space. There could be many interesting metrics on this space of solutions. In your mind, think of X as the set of all triangulations of a polygon. So there could be many interesting metrics on your solution space. Take one, say D. And now you're given an input to your problem, some number K. And instead of outputting one solution, you want to return K solutions, X1 to Xk, such that you maximize some sort of diversity. And what notion of diversity do we have? Well, the two things are average distance between your solutions or the minimum distance between your solutions. So the minimum distance would be that you look at the closest pair of your K solutions and you want to maximize that. And the average distance would be sum of all pairwise distances divided by K choose 2, where K is your number of solutions. And because K choose 2 is just a constant, it's basically just maximizing the sum of all distances between your solutions. So given a problem at a number K, find K solutions that are as spread apart as possible with respect to either the sum of distances or the minimum distance. So this is a general class of problems. And for us, for now, we will think of polygon triangulation. So you have a polygon, X is the set of all possible triangulations of the polygon. Every triangulation has a fixed number of diagonals for this polygon. And the metric that we use to compare two triangulations is simply the number of diagonals that is in one triangulation, but not in the other. So the size of the symmetric difference of the two triangulations. So the distance between two triangulations T1 and T2 is the size of, this is the symmetric difference. So for me, a triangulation is just the set of its diagonals. So this is the symmetric difference of two sets. And so this is my definition of the distance between two triangulations. And now the problem is simply given a polygon and an integer K, find me K triangulations that either maximize the average distance where I've hidden the constant or the minimum distance. So hopefully the problem makes sense.
The simple polygon?
Simple polygon, yes, for now. Yes, I don't think we can handle polygon with this. Okay, so why are we studying this problem? Well, in general, why this whole diverse optimization kind of class of problems? Well, one simple motivation is you want to present the user with different choices. You don't want to give the user just one solution. If there are a bunch of other reasonably good solutions, you present all of them to the user and you let the user choose between them. It's another way to say it, it's a more representative sampling of the solution space. So if there are many good solutions, then you don't want an algorithm to just focus on one particular area of the solution space. It would be nice if you could give them a representative sample of the entire set of solutions. And then there is some motivation that comes from security. So a standard example I like to give is if there's a patroller who's going around a set of locations, taking the same tour every day is worse when it comes to security as switching between different tours, right? So you could find a bunch of still reasonably short tours. So think of the TSP. Maybe you don't want to go on the optimal traveling salesman route every day. But if I have a bunch of good tours that look very different, every day I can just choose randomly between them. And it gives me some sort of security against an adversary who's just observing my tool. What is the motivation for diverse triangulations in particular? Well, many heuristics or provable algorithms in computational geometry, they start with a triangulation. The first step is triangulate the polygon. And even in like numerical solvers for PDEs, they start with some sort of mesh, these finite element methods. And once you run your algorithm on a given triangulation, it makes your algorithm specific to the starting triangulation. And one potential application could be that you generate different looking triangulations and you average whatever computation you're doing. Instead of one triangulation, you average it over these different triangulations. And hopefully the answer is more robust to the actual domain and less dependent on the starting triangulation that you chose. Good. A stronger or sort of I guess a slightly more complicated problem we study is diverse and nice triangulations. So previously you're allowed to output any triangulation of the polygon, right? But some triangulations are nicer than others. It's well known that for many applications, you prefer certain type of triangulations over others. So for example, maybe you don't want, so you want to consider the Euclidean length of your triangulation, meaning the sum of all the diagonals in your triangulation. You don't want it to be too much. Or what is very popular are also these Delaunay triangulations, which maximize the smallest angle in a triangulation. And so now we can enforce the algorithm to also output nice triangulations. So now the input is the polygon and some sort of quality measure Q. So this quality measure will tell you how good a triangulation is. Takes as input a triangulation, tells you how good or bad it is. And right now, let's just say smaller, I mean, it outputs a number and smaller is better. So that. And now as the input to the problem, I specify the polygon, how many triangulations I want, and also how good the triangulation I want. And now the goal is to return k triangulations such that each of them is good. So this number Q naught tells me the quality measure. So every triangulation must be good, but what I'm calling nice. And subject to that, I want to maximize this diversity, the total distance or the minimum distance between triangulations. So an example of the problem here is I give you a polygon and I specify in some way that I want a triangulation that's close to Delaunay. And we will see a bunch of what it means to be close to Delaunay. This is something that we're taking from previous work, these definitions of what a triangulation, what it means for a triangulation to be close to Delaunay. And now the problem is output k triangulations, each of which is close to Delaunay, and they look as different as possible. So in a, like if you were to just look at a picture, that's the space of all triangulations. And the first problem, diverse triangulation problem, if k is 6, then I'm looking for 6 triangulations that are as far apart as possible in the space of all triangulations. And so this will be called the DT, diverse triangulations problem. And then the stronger one is where I specify a subset of nice triangulations. And right now the subset I made it just a connected space, but it's not necessary that it has to be connected. And in the diverse and nice triangulations problem, all the reported triangulations must be inside this nice subset and as far apart as possible inside that nice subset. Any questions about the problem statement? Now, one quick thing is in this nice triangulation problem, the user has to input this quality Q0, like all our triangulation should be better than Q0. But because we like to use approximation algorithm notation, we will let the user input some approximation factor alpha, and then my Q0 will be alpha times the quality of the best triangulation. So instead of asking the user to input exactly the quality, I just allow them to input the approximation factor. Right, so it's nothing. So this is again the problem definition for diverse and nice triangulations. So now the quality of every triangulation should be at most alpha times the quality of the optimal triangulation. They should be as diverse as possible. And clearly, if I just put alpha equal to infinity, then I don't care about the quality, and then I just get back the original problem where I don't restrict the quality of the triangulation. Okay, so since I'm talking so much about the quality of triangulation, just one slide where I'll mention what sort of quality of triangulations people may be interested in and what we can handle. So the first thing I mentioned was the Euclidean length. So that's pretty standard, the total length of the triangulation. And in this figure, you will see four sub-figures. Each of them is another notion of how close it means for a triangulation to be Delaunay. So for those who are not familiar with the Delaunay triangulation, it's the dual of the Voronoi diagram, or as I stated, is a triangulation that maximizes the smallest angle amongst all triangulations. But you could have a triangulation that's not Delaunay, and then how do you quantify how close it is being to Delaunay? So in figure A, you will see, so most of these methods will first define a measure on an edge. Right? So if this edge was a Delaunay edge, then you would have an empty circle that contains this edge. But if this edge is not a Delaunay edge, then you can quantify how close this edge is to being Delaunay by taking the fraction of the length of the edge that is contained in the largest empty circle. So the Delaunay quality of this edge is the fraction of its length that's contained in the largest empty circle. That's one notion of being close to Delaunay. Here's another notion where if you have an edge, you look at the tangent, the two tangents formed at this P1, at this point P1. And again, if this edge was a Delaunay edge, then this thing would be a proper circle and the angle would be pi. In this case, it's less than pi. And there are two other measures of, so all these measures were introduced in CG, I think 4 or 5 years ago. So we are not making up these definitions of Delaunay, but what I want to point out is our methods will work for the first three, so A, B, and C, but they will not work for D. And the reason is because for A, B, and C, like what we care about are measures that are decomposable, meaning the quality of a triangulation can be written as the sum of the quality of the edges in the triangulation or the quality of the triangles in the triangulation. Nothing more than that. So in this case, I would just sum up the quality of all such edges in my triangulation. Same here, same here. But for example, this opposing angle. So what is this measure? So the opposing angles, the Delaunay measure of an edge is you sum up the opposing angles of the two triangles adjacent to this edge. And now this measure depends on other triangles in the triangulation also. I cannot write the quality measure of my whole triangulation as just an individual sum over triangles in my triangulation. So we call these measures decomposable. And basically the bottom line is whatever algorithms I'm going to show for the diverse and nice triangulations problem, they will work as long as the quality measure is decomposable. Meaning you can write down the quality of a triangulation as a sum over edges of triangles. So non-decomposable measures, like if you want to minimize the maximum length of a triangulation, the maximum edge length in a triangulation, that's not decomposable. So the methods I'm going to tell you won't work for that.
Can you repeat the opposing angles issue?
So if I have a triangulation, given an edge of the triangulation, you look at the two adjacent triangles and you look at these two angles.
Yeah.
And if this triangulation is a Delaunay triangulation, then the sum of these two angles should be at least pi.
Okay.
Otherwise, it would be less.
Right.
So how close it is to pi is the measure of how close this edge is to be Delaunay. Okay. So now I have defined the problems for you. Let me just quickly state our result. So it's a computational result that says, if you give me the polygon, how many triangulations you want, and a decomposable quality measure Q, and how good you want your triangulations by that alpha, I can give you an algorithm that runs in time that's polynomial in the number of vertices of the polygon and how many triangulations you want. It will return k triangulations, each of which is as good as you wanted it to be. And the sum of my pairwise distances, so the sum diversity is at least some factor times the optimal. And what's my factor? Well, so if you want to say it's at least half, half is always there. One of the two terms in the max is a half. So I'll output to you a set of triangulations that will satisfy the quality constraint, and their diversity will be at least 50% of the diversity of an optimal set. But if K is actually large, let's say K is more than 5, meaning you want more than 5 triangulations, then actually my approximation factor gets better than that. This is like a 1 minus 2 over K. So you keep increasing K, this actually goes to 1. So if you want more and more triangulations, I can approximate the optimum better and better. So, and notice that this is for the sum version. For the min version, we don't get a result, and I'll mention why the min is actually harder than the sum. Any questions about this result? Okay. So basically, there's 5 main players in getting this result, and all of these concepts are pretty general. So let me go through them and see and try to convince you why they, at what stages do they appear in this problem of diverse and matched triangulation. So the first, and so after the 5 players, we actually sort of get a new technique that we're calling diverse dynamic programming. So the title of this talk is Diverse Triangulations and Geometric Knapsacks, but the technique we develop can be used for a lot of other problems that in the classical algorithms course could be solved using dynamic programming. So if you, in some sense, if you have a dynamic program for a problem that's many problems for which you have dynamic programs, we can do diverse dynamic programming and get these diverse results for that. Okay, so let's look at the first pair, which is dispersion. So consider the following problem. I give you n points in a metric space and a number k, and I want you to find k points from this metric space that either maximize the sum of the pairwise distances between the k points or the minimum pairwise distance between the k points. Think of this problem as you have a bunch of locations and you want to put up k cell phone towers, and you want the cell phone towers to be far away from each other so as to minimize interference. Right, so find k points that are as far apart as possible. So this problem is NP complete for both versions, for both the sum and the min versions, but there is a simple half approximation algorithm. And the simple half approximation algorithm is called the farthest point insertion, which says start with any point, put a cell phone tower there, then look at the point that is the farthest from the first point, put your second cell phone tower there. Third one, you can guess, it's the one that is the farthest from the first two. But what do I mean by farthest from the first two? Well, so remember there's 2 versions, right? There's the sum version and the min version. So for the sum version, if you've already found, let's say, I minus 1 points, then you find the point that maximizes the sum of the distances to the previously found points. And if you're trying to attack the min version, then your definition of farthest is the one that maximizes the minimum distance to any of the previously found points. So with a different definition of farthest for each of the 2 versions, you run this farthest point insertion algorithm, and it gives you a half approximation. So what does that mean? I mean, this algorithm will end in k iterations, because in every iteration it will add a new point. And if you run the sum version, the points that you get, their sum of distances will be at least half of the optimal, and same for the min version. So notice here that the metric space is size n, and at each time I'm adding a farthest point, so each iteration is roughly taking order n time, because I look over all the other points, I see who's the farthest from my current set. And I run this algorithm k iterations, right? Every time I'm adding a point, so this algorithm runs in nk time, and gives a half approximation for both versions. The second proof is kind of easy. The first proof is not so easy. The first proof was, people thought for a long time that the approximation factor was a 4, but recently it was improved to a 2. So the first question is, why can't we just use it for our diverse triangulations problem, right? I mean, I just told you this, the problem of dispersion is precisely given n points in a metric space, find k points that are far away, and the running time is n times k. So, I mean, why cannot I directly use it for dispersion? Well, because the space of triangulation is exponential in the size of the polygon. So I can't just blindly iterate over all triangulations and try to find the farthest. I have to be smarter than that. So the space of triangulation is exponential in the size of the input. So the normal version of Gonzalez algorithm does not work. And I need a smarter way to do this farthest point insertion in polynomial time. And it has somehow to be implicit. So there's an optimization problem hidden in trying to find the farthest triangulation. So here is the solution if you don't care about quality. And this is a trick. The trick is, say you've already computed I-1 triangulations. Now what you do is, to every possible diagonal in your polygon, you give it a weight. And what is the weight of a diagonal? So originally all weights are 0. And the weight of a diagonal A is how many of your already computed triangulations contain that diagonal. Right? So this is how much this diagonal has already appeared in the previously found triangulation. So clearly my new triangulation, I would favor diagonals with smaller weights. If there's a weight 0 diagonal, I would want to take it. And if there's a high weight diagonal, then I want to avoid it. And what happens nicely because of setting these weights up is now if you take any triangulation T and you look at the sum of the weights of the diagonals in that triangulation, where the weights are defined by the previously found triangulations, then it turns out that that is precisely the distance of that triangulation T from the previously found triangulation. And remember, in Gonzalez algorithm, we want to find the triangulation T that maximizes this. And it turns out that this is equivalent to minimizing the weight of the triangulation. So what have we done? We have reduced finding the farthest triangulation to a minimum weight triangulation problem. And this has been studied in computational geometry. This trick does not work for the min version. So notice here, this is the sum of the distances of the triangulation from the previous found triangulations. And if you replace the sum by a min, then it's no longer the weight of the triangulation. So as I said, the problem on the left is a min-weight triangulation problem. And this has been solved. But originally, the motivation for solving the min-weight triangulation was when the length of an edge, when the weight of an edge is its length. Because you want to find triangulations that have less length. But actually, that algorithm works no matter what the length of an edge is. I mean, no matter what the weight of an edge is. And now here, my weight of an edge is some integer. So I can still plug it in this algorithm. And that algorithm is a dynamic programming algorithm. It runs in time n cubed, and it computes the minimum weight. So that gives us the solution for just the diverse triangulation problem without any quality constraint. And it gives a half approximation only to the sum version. Right. Unfortunately, there is a small bug here, which is the following. Just consider the metric space of those 4 points there. And now let's say I ask you put 4 cell phone towers, maximally spread apart. Clearly, there's 4 points, so that's where you should put the 4 cell phone towers. But if you run this farthest point algorithm, so let's say you select the first point here, the second here, and the third here. And now when you look at the 4th point, and the 4th point by definition, the farthest would be that maximizes the sum to the previously 3 chosen points. It turns out that the 4th point that maximizes the sum to the 3 vertices is not this, but it's one of these. And now clearly, if my metric space was small, I can just say, well, why would I choose the same point again? But notice in my space of triangulations, I have this implicit program that I'm doing. So if I've already found 5 triangulations, and then I run this program has no way of making sure that it doesn't return one of the same triangulations again. Because it is honestly returning the farthest triangulation to the first 5 triangulations. But that could be one of the first 5 triangulations. So this thing could happen. And we don't want to repeat the triangulations. So basically, this can be fixed by, instead of just finding the smallest weight, you find not just the best, but the top I ones. And now you're guaranteed that one of them has to be different from the previous one. So my example, if I already found 5 triangulations, instead of finding the farthest triangulation, I'll find the top 6 farthest triangulations, and then one of them has to be different from the ones that I already found. Good. So this gives the result for the, this gives an approximation factor half, but to get the more impressive approximation factor of 1 minus 2 over k, the one that actually goes to 1 as k gets larger and larger, and there is a bit more work. Just this farthest point algorithm doesn't work. You have to do some sort of a swapping algorithm where you start with a solution set, and then you throw some solution out, put another solution in order to increase this diversity. So I'll skip that. But more interestingly, this thing only works because I haven't specified a quality constraint so far. And what if I do want a quality constraint? Well, so that brings us to the third layer. So I've told you about the dispersion and about Gonzalez's algorithm. And these two are kind of enough to give us diverse triangulations if you don't care about quality. If you do care about quality, the thing that comes next is bi-criteria triangulations. And this is a topic which I think would be of interest to the CG people, even if you don't care about diversity. So as the name suggests, what's a bi-criteria triangulation? Let me just skip this thing. So suppose there are 2 quality functions, Q1 and Q2, on the space of triangulations. Like Q1 could be the Euclidean length of a triangulation, and Q2 could be how close it is to Delaunay, right? And maybe I want to play with the between the trade-off between the two. Maybe I want something that's good in both respects. We know how to compute test Euclidean weight triangulation. We know how to compute Delaunay triangulations, and they will usually not be the same. What if I want to play between the trade-off? So I give you a budget on the second quality, and I want you to minimize the first quality. I want you to find a triangulation that is good with respect to the second, and is subject to that, it's optimal with respect to the first quality measure. So out of the space of all triangulations that are 50% Delaunay, find me the one with the smallest length. Right? So this problem, surprisingly, at least we could not find any prior work on this, finding a triangulation that's in this bi-criteria version. And this turns out, it basically turns out that the previous reduction that I showed you for Gonzalez, now you not only have to find a minimum weight triangulation, but you have this extra condition that your triangulation also has to be nice. So the quality constraint appears sort of naturally. And we wanted to study this for arbitrary 2 quality functions, right? So forget about the diversity problem. Given 2 quality measures, find this bi-criteria problem. And turns out that this problem is hard. So we could prove that this bi-criteria triangulation problem, it's unlikely to have a polynomial time solution. And the way we could prove hardness for this is via the problem of knapsack. So knapsack is a classically studied problem in algorithms. It has no geometry in it. And it's known that knapsack is like a hard problem. And so we could show that finding these kind of triangulations that are good with respect to 2 measures is hard, because if you could do that, then you could solve the knapsack.
This might be a silly question, but what is weakly NPR?
So what that means is that you could have algorithms that, so let me describe the input to knapsack and it become very clear, right? So the input to knapsack is a bunch of items. So you have a bunch of items that you can choose. Item I has weight Wi and a value Vi. So Wi is how many pounds or whatever the dimension of the item, and Vi is, think of it as the profit. If you've just entered a jewelry store and there's a bunch of things, but you have a limited knapsack. W is the size of your knapsack. And the question that this problem asks is, I want to select a subset S of the items that maximizes the total value, subject to the constraint that they still fit in my knapsack. So the weight of the items I select should be less than W. So the input to the problem is n items with their weights and values and the size of the knapsack. And the output of this problem is the best value subset of the items that still fits in my knapsack. And what weakly hard means that pseudo polynomial time algorithms are possible for this. So for example, for knapsack, you can get an algorithm that runs in time n times w. However, that's not polynomial because to specify w, I only need to give you log w bits.
Okay.
So in the input size, it's not polynomial, but it's pseudo polynomial. Okay, so I won't have time to go through the reduction, but you can kind of imagine not too hard reduction where basically given an input. So I'm trying to show that solving this bi-criteria triangulation would solve the knapsack problem. So given an input to the knapsack problem with these things, I can create a polygon where basically, I mean, the thing in this polygon that really matters are these sort of parallelograms. And if you take the longer edge of the parallelogram, then you have a larger length. But and if you take the shorter edge of the parallelogram, you have the shorter length. But but the shorter length is worse for the Delaunay, and the longer length is better for the Delaunay. So you create a conflict between choosing one of these two. And basically, if you were to solve this bi-criteria triangulation just by reading off from each of these parallelograms which diagonal you've chosen, you know whether to select the corresponding item or not. And so because knapsack is unlikely to have a strongly polynomial time algorithm, bi-criteria triangulation is unlikely to have this polynomial time algorithm also. So, but that's bad news, right? Because this bi-criteria problem was appearing in our farthest point insertion for these nice triangulation algorithms. But the key point is in realizing that there is the weakly here. So as I said, weakly means there are algorithms of this type, n times w, where w is the size of the knapsack. Or there's also an algorithm which is n squared times the maximum value of any of those objects. So we have algorithms that run in this time. And again, this is not polynomial because to specify w or the values, I only need log of that many bits. And these algorithms are dynamic programming. So you set up a table and the final value of the table gives you this value. So although bi-criteria triangulation being hard is bad news, what can these sort of algorithms give us for our diversity problem? And now here the nice observation is that the way I define the weights, so if you remember, the weight of an edge is the number of previously found triangulations that contain it. And so the weight is always less than k, because k is the total number of triangulations I'm trying to find. And the weight will get mapped in this previous reduction that I showed you. The weight is basically the value of your item. And so what you can get is, let me see if I have it. Okay, yeah, so I did mention it here. So that was the weight. Weight is all at most k. And so basically I will get something like an n squared k algorithm, because my largest value that I will ever encounter if I'm solving bi-criteria inside my diverse triangulation problem will be at most k.
But to get this running time, don't you also need to assume that everything is integer or something like that?
Yes. For w and v, yes. So these are all integers.
I see, but it's not a problem with Euclidean distances or something?
So the good thing is, because knapsack has two types of algorithms, right? My weight is so in general, to solve the bi-criteria, I cannot apply these. But when I'm solving this diverse problem, one of my quality is always an integer, because it is how many times it has appeared in the previous triangulation. And as long as one of them is an integer and bounded,
Yeah.
I can apply at least one of these two results. So yeah, that's the advantage that happens here because of the integer.
Thanks.
And so that kind of gives us this. So now you kind of have seen all the players, and I guess you can kind of guess what this diverse dynamic programming is. Let me give you the just an example of diverse dynamic programming for the simplest problem of knapsack. So I've told you for diverse triangulations, but this diverse dynamic programming technique works for a lot of dynamic programming algorithms. And in an algorithms course, one of the first problems you will see a DP for is knapsack. So now here, the input is the input to knapsack, and you want to find diverse solutions to knapsack. So what do I mean by diverse solutions to knapsack? If I have two subsets of the n items, S and S prime, so I'll define the diversity simply as, again, the size of the symmetric difference, and I want to maximize this. And so here I'm trying to tell you the DP. Yeah, so I guess in 2 minutes I can tell you. So I told you knapsack has these two algorithms, NW over N squared, and I care about this one. So how do I get this algorithm? Well, I make a table. And so DP is sort of the table. It'll be parameterized by two indices. The first will be a value I, which will range from 1 to n. And the second will be a value V, which will range from 0 to n times the maximum value of any single object. And what is this entry in the table store? It stores the smallest possible weight of, so I restrict the items only from 1 through I, not all possible n items, but only 1 through I. And I also want their value to be at least V, and subject to these two, I want the smallest possible weight. And now you can set up a nice recurrence relation and solve this table. How many entries does this table have? N rows and n Vmax columns, so that much, and every entry can be computed in constant time if all the previous entries are kind of computed. So that's this one. And now, what is this diverse dynamic programming? Basically, we increase the dimension of the table by one more, where so if I've already computed j minus 1 solutions, how do I compute the jth solution? I create a table that has one more dimension, and now I have the previous things, but also I'm only storing solutions whose sum of distances from the previous solutions is at least d, where d is this new dimension that I created. So I introduce a new dimension, and now that dimension tells me how different my new solution is from the previous one. And again, I can write down a recurrence relation for this DP, and the last entry of this table will give me the farthest solution from my previously found solution. And now the running time, because I have an extra dimension, I get an extra n. And if I'm in the jth iteration, I get an extra j, but it's all poly. So for now, we don't care. And yeah, so that bug that I mentioned for the farthest insertion also appears here, because even though my final entry will have the farthest solution, again, it might be one of the previous j minus 1 solutions. So now in my dynamic program, I not only have to find the best, but the j best. Because if I find the j best, then one of them will be different from the previously found. So standard trick works here. And so basically this is for diverse knapsack, which is just one example of diverse dynamic programming. We get sort of three different types of algorithms. So first, if you want all your solutions to be optimal, right? So I want all subsets returned by this diverse knapsack problem to be the best value subsets. Then I have an algorithm that runs in that time, and the total diversity is at least half of the optimal set of k solutions knapsack. If I not only want my solutions to be optimal, but I also want the optimal diversity. So I want no approximation either to the quality of the solution or the diversity of the solution. Then my running time is large, as expected. And lastly, you can ask for like p-task type of things. So I want solutions which are not optimal, but almost optimal. So we can get like a 1 minus order epsilon approximate solutions with total diversity at least half in poly time, poly in both n and k. And so this is for knapsack. I already showed you diverse nice triangulations, diverse knapsack. And then one problem that I really like, where we can also apply this technique too, is geometric knapsack. So it turns out that at least what I thought was geometric knapsack, or what most of us thought was geometric knapsack, is sort of a new version. And there is a much older version of geometric knapsack, which was the only paper I've seen is by Joe, St, and Samir. And I like the older version slightly more, so I'm going to state that one first. So this is, first I'll describe geometric knapsack problem, and then you can figure out what the diverse version is from the definition. So I give you n points in the plane, and each point has a value associated to it. And I give you a rope of length L, and you have to enclose these points within a curve. The perimeter of the curve should be at most L, and the profit that you get is whatever points are inside your curve. So if you use your length L to do it like that, then the value of this subset is whatever you add them, so 12. So the value of this is 12. And so the question is, I give you the point set and the length L, find me the maximum possible subset of items that you can get by enclosing within a curve of length L. Because the points all have non-negative values, it's clear that you will always use a convex polygon. There's no point making a reflex angle because everyone has a positive thing and you're only saving up on the length. So this problem was studied by Joe, ST, and Samir in 1993, and they gave an algorithm. So this is sort of the geometric analog of knapsack that they defined, and they gave a dynamic programming algorithm for this. So you can find the best possible shape that contains the maximum value of the points. And now, what can I ask in the diverse version? So I could say two things, right? One, I could ask for different looking polygons, but that's actually not very interesting. Here, a solution is more sort of the subset of points contained inside it, right? So, I mean, even though, so if I have these two subsets, let me try to make sure I have it correct. Yes. So, solutions to this problem will look different if they enclose a different set of points. Like I don't really care about the boundary, or what I really care about is the subset of points that I'm getting from different solutions. So if I have a red curve that's giving me this subset of points S1, and if I have a blue curve that's giving me this subset of points S2, then really how different are these two solutions? Well, I look at how many points are in one curve, are in one polygon, but not in the other. And in this case, it's 4. So that's my diversity measure. And now the diverse geometric knapsack problem is, as you would expect, I give you this input. I tell you how many polygons I want. Find me k polygons that enclose as different looking subsets of the original point set as possible. And all of them are optimal. Right? All of them give close to the maximum value. So our methods work for this. I'm not going to describe how or why, but it's kind of along the previous techniques that I showed you. And recently, what people mean by geometric knapsack is this, where in the original knapsack, you had items that had a weight and a value. Now here, your items are sort of rectangles. So this is 2D geometric knapsack. So the item comes with a width, a height, and a value. And you have an integer n, which is the size of your suitcase. And you want to pack your rectangles inside your suitcase so as to maximize the values.
It's more like a two-dimensional.
It's more like a two-dimensional. So previously, we thought this is the only geometric knapsack known, but actually this one predates it by quite a while.
It's really nice.
Yeah, so both are, I guess both can be given the name geometric knapsack. There is nothing stopping. And so now here also you can ask, well, how many different ways are there of me packing my suitcase optimally? Right. So I want optimal type of items, but I want very different looking packings of my suitcase with these rectangles. And our techniques apply to this problem also. That's the theorem for nice triangulations again, for those who want to see it one last time. The approximation factor. So the quality is, even for the geometric knapsack, the quality is still within the bounds of the prescribed quality by the user. And the diversity is at least half or even better if k is large, if the number of solutions is large. Yep, and so open problems. The running time, you might have seen an n to the 4 and a k to the 4, which makes our approach impractical for very large n. So we are implementing our current algorithm, and very soon we will know at what size of the polygon the machine dies. So it would be good to improve the running time, so we can actually, for large polygons, we can generate different looking triangulations and do this experiment on this finite element method that I described, averaging over a bunch of different triangulations. The max min version, as I said, is difficult. And it's difficult because we've been able to relate it to a problem in coding theory. So coding theory is where so a code is just a bit vector, and you're in the Hamming space, you're looking for bit vectors that are far away. And turns out if you could do max min version of the triangulation, then you can get these optimal codes. So that's unlikely to be easy. One thing I'm very interested in is the flip distance between triangulations. So if you in a triangulation, you can take an edge, and if the two adjacent triangles form a convex quadrilateral, then you can flip the edge. And it is known that you can get from any triangulation to any other triangulation by a sequence of flips. And clearly the shortest sequence of flips defines a distance on the space of triangulation. It's a metric. And now you can ask for diverse triangulations with respect to this flip distance matrix, metric. For people who know more about the flip distance, they can see the hardness involved in this, because even given two triangulations, computing the flip distance between them is known to be hard. So even if I give you, here's my solution, computing its quality is likely to be hard. Even if you know the solution, finding the distances between all pairs of triangulations could be hard. So that's one reason to expect flip distance to not be very easy. Whatever I told you works for polygons. But what about point sets? I give you endpoints, triangulate them.
What breaks down?
What breaks down is the minimum weight triangulation is not solved. It's so the dynamic program for minimum weight triangulation works for polygons because you have a lot of constraints. But for a point set, there's no constraint really. So there's no minimum weight triangulation for point sets. For point sets also, it might be interesting to allow Steiner points. And this version of diversity that I have, where I just count the symmetric difference, it requires on the point set being the same. If I allow Steiner points, then you can introduce more geometric measures of diversity, which like what kind of Steiner points are being used in one triangulation versus the other. Another problem that I'm very interested in is I give you a set of points. There are many ways to make a polygon out of these set of points. Create as many different looking polygons as possible. And a polygonization is basically a cycle on these set of points. So this is kind of related to the patrolling problem that I mentioned in the beginning of the talk, right? I give you n locations, find me many different tools that are all close to the optimal TSP tool, and they look very different. So that's a special case. So if I don't care about the length of the tool, then I'm asking you to find me different polygonalization. So that's open, and there could be other applications of this technique that if any of you can think of, I would be very happy to chat. And with that, I will stop and take any questions.